With the Burning Crusade just around the corner on Anniversary servers, now is the perfect time to think about what class you want to play. Whether you're tired of being a warrior, a rogue worried about your raid spot, or maybe you just fancy a change. In today's video, we're going to look at the top 5 classes to re-roll to for TBC. We'll cover the pros and cons of each one, what they bring to the table, as well as going into some population statistics and raid setups to show exactly why they are the best to re-roll to. As always, a huge shout out to all the members of my channel. I absolutely love you guys, thank you so much. So the first and most obvious one on the list is of course Shaman. Shaman are the real MVPs of TBC. This is thanks to Heroism or Bloodlust. We don't know what changes are coming with this, but even still you're going to want at least one Shaman in every group. This is because Heroism is so strong and it is party wide. I expect if we do see a change on this, it will be in the form of a sated debuff. As it stands, you'd expect to rotate Shamans into your pamper groups to give 100% Heroism uptime, which is obviously overpowered. And also it basically makes it so if you don't have enough Shamans, you cannot compete in DPS or passes. So because of this, I do expect Blizzard to add the sated debuff this time, meaning you can only use Heroism once per encounter. But even still, you'd still want one Shaman in every group because of the totems, and also Shamans are very strong. So starting with Elemental. Elemental is a very fun burst heavy spec. It brings Totem of Wrath, which gives 3% hit and crit to the casters in the party, making it absolutely essential for your Warlock groups. Elemental's damage is decent. It's not really the best, but it's also not the worst either. But the real strength in Shaman comes in the totems and buffs it brings. The only downside to Elemental is mana. It can't sustain the same level of DPS in longer fights. That said, the demand for Elemental will remain strong since you will always want one in your caster groups. Then you have Enhancement Shaman, which is a fun class using dual wield melee. The most important thing about Enhancement is that it brings the all-important Wind Fury and Unleashed Rage. This makes it essential for your melee groups, and actually Enhancement starts out as one of the top melee DPS if geared correctly. However, it is very gear dependent, so bad luck with drops will see you fall behind in DPS very quickly. That said, again, raids will always want you regardless thanks to the all-important totems and buffs. And then finally, the Resto Shaman. This is the top healer in TBC. Chain Heal is incredibly strong and has unmatched raid healing throughput, as well as bringing incredibly strong group utility and the all-important Mana Tide totem. The only real downside to this spec is you have to be very stationary. If you need to move for encounters, then it's hard to do any healing, and also single target healing isn't that great, but if you partner it with a Holy Paladin or Priest, you synergize very well. Resto Shaman will remain wanted throughout the expansion, with multiple Resto Shamans wanted every raid. It's worth noting that obviously Alliance don't have access to Shamans right now, so when looking at the current population breakdown, you have to bear this in mind. But if you are an Alliance player, you'll have a huge opportunity here to bridge the population gap, and if you're willing to level one up in pre-patch, you will not be short of invites. But as it stands right now in Phase 6 of Classic Anniversary, Shamans make up 6.97% of the raid population. But in TBC, we expect a demand of a whopping 20%. Of course, this is assuming Bloodlust or Heroism doesn't get changed to raid-wide, which I'm assuming that it won't. If anything, like I said, there may be a debuff added. In any case, they're still going to be in huge demand. If you're an Alliance, leveling a Draenei Shaman is going to be a great move and almost guarantees you a raid spot of some kind. It's especially good this time around with dual spec, so yes, number 1 is Shaman. The next one on the list is probably one that you didn't expect, and that is Druid. Druid is an incredibly versatile spec and is the only class in the game that can fit all 4 different roles competitively. So with dual spec this time around, Druid is a really strong choice if you favor the versatile playstyle. But let's look at the 4 spec options. Starting off with Balance, also known as Boomkin. This is a ranged DPS that alternates between Wrath and Starfire while maintaining strong dots with Moonfire and Insect Swarm. Moonkins are loved for the buffs that they bring, with Moonkin Aura giving a huge 5% spell crit for the party, Innovate for your Arcane Mages or Healers, Improved Fairy Fire brings a nice 3% hit for the melee in the raid as well, and of course the fail-safe Battle Res, meaning you can resurrect people in combat. While While in Classic, Boomkin was a literal meme, in TBC it's improved massively. However, it does still struggle with those foundational mana issues like it did in Classic, and while it does have Innovate, it's extremely poor value to use Innovate on yourself because you'll probably be bringing this buff for your top pumper Arcane Mage. On average, Boomkin is sadly at the bottom in terms of personal DPS, but that's not to say it's majorly bad, it's still competitive, but Boomkins will always be in high demand due to the buffs and debuffs that they bring. Many raids will always want to take one for every caster group. Next up is the Feral Bear Tank. Feral tanks use Mangle, Lacerate and Swipe in bear form to produce high amounts of threat. This is especially good in single target. Bears are exceptionally good at physical mitigation thanks to their high armor and health values. The only real downside to Feral is it's not that good with AoE threat and has very limited defensive cooldowns. Traditionally, Ferals have always been the master off tank thanks to being able to switch to DPS gear and do good DPS in cat form when not needed, but now with dual spec, most off tanks can do this now by swapping spec in between fights. So this works slightly against Feral this time around. That said, every 25-man raid take at least one Feral tank, so if you're playing one as one of your specs, you're pretty safe. Next, the other side of Feral is of course the cat DPS. Feral DPS is energy based, focusing on maintaining rip while weaving in shred and ferocious bite. Ferals bring a big buff which is leader of the pack, which gives 5% melee and ranged crit to the party. So every melee and hunter absolutely love them. That said, they have one of the most complex rotations and struggle early on due to gear. They can also clutch some scenarios by quickly swapping into bear form to tank, and they of course bring battle res and innovate. Phase 1 performance puts them just above balanced druid with a much more complex rotation, and being melee makes them generally more harder to play than balance. But depending on the raid setup, you can expect at least one feral DPS in every 25-man raid, potentially more if it's a melee or hunter heavy raid. And lastly, onto the Resto Druid. Resto is a heal over time specialist, focusing on Life Bloom, Rejuvenation, Regrowth and Swiftmend. Resto also brings Tree Form, which increases the healing received of your party members, which makes them absolutely great in the tank group. It's an extremely mana efficient healer with a flow of steady heals for the tanks and the raid. It synergizes great with other healers and again has Innovate and Battle Res. Resto Druid's strength is also its biggest weakness. It relies heavily on heal over time effects, making it one of the best HPS healers, but it really struggles to heal heavy single target burst, which it relies on other healers for. That said, Resto will always be in high demand for raids, and raids will always look to take at least one. Now for the population breakdown, Druid specs make up just 5.7% of the total raid population, while in TBC we expect a minimum of 12% in the raid. Therefore, right now there's a high demand for Druid with an increase of 6.3%, meaning if you were to roll one, you have a much higher chance of getting a raid spot, especially if you utilize dual spec to be incredibly versatile. Raid leaders will love you. Now onto a very obvious one, and that is Hunter. Hunter is a fantastic choice in TBC due to its simple playstyle and extremely high DPS. While there are 3 Hunter specs in total, today we're going to be talking about Beast Mastery and Survival, since we're mostly looking at Phase 1. So starting off with Beast Mastery, also known as BM. BM Hunters are generally considered the king of Phase 1 DPS due to its low gear dependency, massive pet scaling, and extremely simple rotation. Many hunters often talk about having to melee weave and how the class has an incredibly high skill ceiling. In reality, it's great that you have these options to add a marginal DPS increase. The majority of your damage though is still coming from your pet, so keeping your pet alive is your biggest priority, and by doing this will keep you at the top DPS alone. So the fundamentals are there, and if you want to add to it you can, but you don't necessarily need to. BM Hunter also brings Ferocious Inspiration, giving the party a 3% damage increase, but hunters also bring Misdirection, which is a fantastic tool. What makes BM Hunter great is that they don't rely on anyone else for damage, meaning they can be stacked to increase overall raid DPS very easily. The only real class that even comes close to Hunter is Arcane Mage, but Arcane relies so much on support to even compete against Hunter, so that's why you see so many raids stacking Hunters. So yeah, every raid will want to be having multiple Hunters if they can. And the other spec, of course, is Survival Hunter, which is a physical support spec applying exposed weakness to the target, which is a huge attack power buff for the whole raid based on your agility. Having a Survival Hunter increases your raid DPS enormously thanks to this exposed weakness. They are behind BM in terms of personal DPS, but they still outdamage most classes even as a support spec. Every raid will want one Survival Hunter, and having it as a dual spec option makes it even easier now than ever. And finally, a population breakdown. Right now, Hunters make up just 4.85% of raiders. That's right, less than 5% of raiders. And in TBC, we expect a demand of at least 12%. Meaning there is a huge demand for Hunters right now, so you should take great confidence if you decide to be one of them. Now, number 4 on the list is a caster pick, and of course it is Warlock. Lock is very strong in phase 1, and it's typically popular thanks to its incredibly simple rotation, high DPS and stackability. The two specs I want to talk about are Destruction and Affliction. First off, Destruction has one of the simplest rotations. You could argue that Arcane Mage is easier, but as a Lock you don't even have to worry about mana, therefore it's very new player friendly as well. The only thing you need to track as a Lock is your threat early on, and that's the only downside. With the amount of DPS it's capable of, it can have some serious threat issues. But this can of course be resolved by having a threat meter and managing it effectively. Thanks to Warlock's high damage and stackability, raids tend to take multiple Warlocks, so there is plenty of raid spots up for grabs. Affliction is the alternate spec, and while it doesn't do quite as much damage as Destruction, it brings very important buffs in the form of Shadow Embrace and Malediction. So in theory it is a support spec, but it still does deal decent damage. Therefore every raid needs at least one Affliction lock to bring that all important buff curse of elements. Having this as a second spec is a great idea. All in all, Warlock is a very strong and popular class in TBC, especially in phase 1, but right now locks just make up 5.75% of the population. And in TBC, we expect that demand to increase to 16%, meaning re-rolling to Warlock is a safe bet with a huge increase in demand of 10.25%. So yeah, that's absolutely wild. Now number 5 should come at no surprise on the list, especially for Horde, which is Paladin. Paladin was my original class back in the day before eventually finding and falling in love with Mage. Similar to Druid, Paladin is very versatile in the fact that it can fill multiple roles, and with the introduction of dual spec on these servers, it means we're going to see more prop Paladins with a rare off spec than ever before. And because of this, it can compete with Druid for the ultimate off tank. Paladin also takes the edge slightly thanks to its extra damage against undead, and in pre-nerf fights such as Nightbane, it excels against the undead skeletons, which are immune to all magical damage except Holy. Starting off with Retribution, in Classic this was another meme spec, but in TBC that totally changes. Ret can finally do some decent DPS, has an exceptionally fun rotation thanks to seal twisting, but they also bring Sanctity Aura, Judgment of Wisdom or Might, and can even provide some backup healing in clutch scenarios. While Ret DPS isn't out of this world amazing, it's surely much better than it was in Classic, and it brings so much utility, playing one is definitely more than viable. And then of course onto Protection. This is an AoE threat machine which excels exceptionally well in dungeons. While in raids it's not quite the best single target tank, it's an amazing off tank, and they are essential for AoE heavy encounters. The perfect scenario would have a warrior be main tank and have a paladin ready to pick up the ads or tank multiple packs with ease. They of course bring Blessing of Kings and the other blessings. It's an incredibly fun tank to play, and if you haven't played it before, I'd definitely recommend it. And as mentioned previously, you can also run dual spec and be rep for encounters where you're not needed to tank, making it very flexible indeed. Raids will always want to bring at least one Protection Paladin. As a side note, in TBC, Protection Paladins come the new best AoE gold farmer, replacing Mage due to the AoE cap. So having a Paladin to farm gold is a very good choice as well. And then finally, Holy Paladin, the spec I played for many years. Holy has the highest single target throughput in the game and has unmatched mana efficiency. as well as bringing cleanse and blessings for raid support. The only downside to Holy Paladin is the fact it does not have an AoE heal and is very bad at raid healing. Because of this, it will usually just focus on tank healing. But yeah, it's a very good tank healer, and the raids will always want to take at least one Holy Paladin. It's worth to mention that all 3 specs will usually spec into improved Seal of the Crusader, which brings an amazing debuff on the target, giving them an increased 3% chance to receive a critical strike, which obviously is amazing. Right now, Paladins make up 7.43%, and in TBC we expect a demand of 12%, meaning there is a higher demand for them, but right now Horde can't play Paladin at all, so if you split the 12% through the middle for both factions, there may be the right amount of Paladins on the Alliance side already. Nonetheless, it's still a very fun class to play, and if you're Horde, you should definitely pick one up. So statistically, those are the 5 best classes to reroll to. But I would like to add an honourable mention, and that is Shadow Priest. While our projections show that we already have the right amount of priests currently raiding, what we don't know is how many of these are going to play Shadow. And Shadow got one of the biggest boosts in TBC. You see, Shadow Priest in TBC is essential and is nicknamed the Mana Battery thanks to the Vampiric Touch, which restores mana to party members based on the damage dealt. This alone guarantees them a spot in every caster group, but Shadow can be so much more than just a mana battery. Of course, on paper it cannot match the raw damage of a Warlock or Mage, but after some time with the perfect gear setup, they can definitely compete. They are easily the 3rd best caster in the game. This is such a breath of fresh air for Shadow Priest because in Classic, Shadow was not viable at all. So it's great for them not only to be viable, be optimal, then of course actually be essential thanks to the utility. The only real downside to Shadow is it has very limited AoE damage, but it's a very fun and rewarding spec that's sought after in TBC. As mentioned previously, our projections show that there isn't a demand gap for Priest as a class in general, but Shadow is well worthy as an honourable mention and always seems to be the unpopular choice of spec as a Priest, and it's a pain to find a proper Shadow Priest, especially as they're so essential to the raid. So there you have it, the very best specs to reroll to in TBC, and in case you're wondering how we got these stats, we broke down all of the raid locks for Classic as of November 2025 and then compared them to the perfectly balanced 25-man raid team in TBC, which the majority of raid leaders are wanting to run. That way we can determine the demand for that perfect setup. Hopefully this video helped you, and if you enjoyed it, please give it a like, and if you want to support the channel, please consider becoming a member. Memberships are available for just $1.99 a month, and this is the biggest way you can support me as a creator. In return, you get so many perks, including exclusive content, as well as access to the member section of my Discord channel, which has all the best gold and game guides included, and this will be updated regularly for TBC as well. But yeah, thanks for watching this video guys, and have a lovely day.